You guys all ready? Okay. Thank you everybody for being here today on short notice. Obviously the governor sent out the news release about the National Guard, so we pulled together this news availability just to, the mayor and chief are going to say a few words about how this came about and answer any questions you have. Mayor Keller.
All right, well, I think I want to begin, let's see here. I want to begin with just one thing just to be really clear, because I know we're all getting a lot of questions, and that's what we're here to clarify. The first thing is what this is not. There is not going to be anyone with weapons. There's not going to be anyone in fatigues. There's not going to be any military vehicles. What this is essentially helping as public service aids, as PSAs. So these are going to be civilians in polos, and they're not going to be doing law enforcement. They're going to be supporting as a civilian, just as our other civilian support folks do. So with that just being, I think, really clear at the top, what are they actually going to be doing? I know there's been several things listed, but as like a public safety aid, what they're going to be doing is things like some traffic control around accident scenes. They're going to be helping secure facilities. They're going to be monitoring some of our buses. They'll likely have a radio. We haven't quite figured that out, but they probably will, so that they can certainly alert APD to things that they see. They're probably going to be helping at the Sunport. They're going to be doing humanitarian assistance. They're going to be helping with prisoner transport, and also helping with the courts. And they're going to be working all over the city. And in command of this effort is our special commander, Luke Langwood, and Chief will talk about his role later. So we also want to let folks know, we've been talking about this for several months, and basically what happened is the National Guard offered to help in any way the city of Albuquerque, and so did the governor. And we talk often about the challenges we have in our state and in our city, and there were a lot of ideas sort of thrown around, but what happened over the last several months is we figured out this PSA-like model might be a really good way to help APD continue the momentum that they've had. And speaking of that momentum, here's what's happening, and we've talked about this quite a bit. In general, for the first time in a decade, most of our crime categories are going down. And this year, that is extremely true in almost every category, and this is what we wanted to show you here. Now you can see this is the chief's dashboard. So these stats, there's some caveats and things like that there, and as we always do, we polish them up quarterly. But I just want to show you, you can see the string of negative numbers right there. Look at this. Almost every crime category is down. I want to repeat that. Since January 1, almost every crime category is down by over 10%. We have never seen this in 10 years. So what we want to do is double down on what's working to actually make this possible. And what's working is technology. You've heard me talk a lot about that. And civilians. And so key to freeing up officers to fight crime and keep those statistics going in this powerfully good direction, we've got to have more civilians. And so a short-term way to help with that is by the National Guardsmen helping out. And so this is part of our civilianization effort that has included our own increase in PSAs. I think we've tripled the number of PSAs from when we came in. And it also is even related to creating our community safety department, a whole department of civilians to take certain types of calls. This is just another piece of that effort. Also, this time frame is important because it's going to buy us time for what we're doing in the academy to graduate both more officers and more PSAs. So I think with that, I would just mention that we'll see how this goes. We hope it's going to be very effective. If it's not, we can just send folks home. That's certainly under the auspice of both the chief and myself. We invited these folks in to see if this program will help Albuquerque. And we also want to note that if it is helpful, we may look at this in other areas. We're facing uncertainty around federal cuts to law enforcement. We're also facing uncertainty at the city level in terms of what we do with opioid funding and how we're funding our treatment and homeless services. And if this is a successful model, we may use it in other ways if, of course, the state feels the same way. So I think with that, I'll hand it over to our chief for a little more details. Chief?
Like Mayor said, first of all, there's been a lot of thought and a lot of time put into creating the right process in which we could get assistance. Crime is down. Crime's down in every category, like Mayor said, from the beginning of the year till now. And that's in the initial letter, that although crime is down, we still want to do better. And we want to continue to clear up our officers, because that's what's made us successful. What's also made us successful is our ability to work with other agencies. We have some of the strongest relationships we've ever had with state police, BCSO, ATF, FBI, and now we're gonna add the National Guard. And we're gonna continue to utilize these resources to the best of our ability. At the beginning of this month, a few days ago, a week ago, we started building what we call our first hive for drones that will be launched to different crime scenes within the city. The National Guardsmen that are gonna be assisting us are gonna be trained up and be able to assist us with the deployment of those drones and the use of those drones. And this, because this program's so new, and we're strained with civilian resources to do that, and anytime we could have a civilian, a professional staff take on a task instead of a SWORD officer, it only benefits the city by ensuring that we get our officers out in the field. If you look at this sheet, everything is going in a very positive direction, but there's one thing we want to improve upon, and it's right here. Scene to clear. Our officers spend a lot of time on scenes that they don't need to. We have officers guarding violent crime scenes for up to 6, 8, 12 hours. We have officers guarding fatal traffic accidents, 6, 8, 12 hours. If I could start taking 6 hours off some of these on-scene clears, it's gonna make a huge difference. And it's gonna start swaying and putting our officers back in the service and getting resources out to the community at even a faster pace. There's been a lot of thought put into this, that's why it's not starting immediately. There will be a series of community meetings with the National Guard and Acting Major Langwit, who's gonna be spearheading this operation for us. And there's gonna be a lot of communication with the community to ensure that they understand that the National Guard does not have law enforcement authority. They cannot take law enforcement action. And I just don't want this to turn into like an, oh my God, the National Guard is here to save the city. No, the National Guard is here to help clear up officers so APD officers can go out and be proactive and take more people to jail, keep the community safer, and continue this trend of lower crime rates. So we will continue this trend of using civilians to the best of our ability, to being creative and thinking outside the box, and utilizing every partnership and every resource possible for us to continue to provide the service that we're providing to the community. Thank you.
Questions?
Questions? Go ahead, Matt.
How many officers, like, you know, even an estimate, even a rough number, how many officers would be freed up by?
We're thinking 20 to 30. And what I want you to think about is, at times, we have anywhere from 1 to 3 people being guarded at the hospital by APD officers. You do 3 shifts 7 days a week, that's up to 9 officers a day, 7 days a week. So you can quickly see how even just assisting us with guard duty at the hospital is gonna assist us in clearing up. That's basically 2 squads over the course of a week that would be cleared up, that we could put back into the field to take calls for service. When you think of even just officers who are on the scene, and I spoke about it with homicide investigations, violent crimes callouts, traffic accidents, fatalities. The other day, I drove, and in the morning, when we did the press conference out at the hotel that we closed on the west side, the first one, there had been PSAs who had been guarding, who had been closing a roadway because of a down power line for hours upon hours, and we called Luke and we got barricades out there. So we always have sometimes officers who have to help relieve in those situations, so being able to fully have a civilian asset in those circumstances is just gonna help us clear up more and more sworn officers.
What are the numbers of sworn officers?
We are currently at somewhere around 890 with about, give or take, I think 890, 880, with another 50 in training, and we're getting ready to start another 30. So we're getting very close to our funded 1,000 officers.
But how many of those officers are actually on the streets patrolling?
That I could get you that answer, but we have to take into account that a lot of times people look at it and say, how many officers are taking calls for service? I've taken a very different approach to that. I have officers who take calls for service, and we have our PRT teams. We have the biggest proactive response teams that this city's ever seen, or the police department. Every single commander has a proactive response team. that their job is to be out there proactive, taking calls. So those officers are part of those field numbers, and we'll work on getting some numbers out to you.
And could you break that down by area command as well?
Yeah, they'll break it down by area.
Um, are you
No,
gonna?
you can go if you're ready.
You know, you guys mentioned several times, and you're pointing to these numbers saying that crime is down. We've heard that year over year. These tools are supposed to be reserved for emergencies. So if this is an emergency now, why was it not an emergency last year or the year before when we're seeing that those numbers were higher?
I quite honestly think that it wasn't something that anybody had thought about. It wasn't something that anybody had approached us to and said, hey, can you utilize these resources and help? And although crime is down, and it's in the letter, I think we still have a lot of progress to make. And there's still a lot of things we want to do to continue to combat crime within the city. And I will do everything I can to ensure that we have the resources to someday say that our crime is lower than it's ever been historically, and we're not at that point. Crime is down, but there's still ways to go with it. Wait a minute.
What's the end game? Because I mean, if they come in and they do help, I mean, do they just never leave? I mean, what's like, how are you gonna fill those positions with officers at some point? I mean, what's kind of the end game here?
You know, Mayor alluded to it. He talked about the fact that by the fall, we hope to have 1,000 officers. If we reduce crime and we're able to get people to the resources or get people who should be in jail in custody for longer periods of time, it only benefits us as a police department because we would need less resources. And I've always had this philosophy. You go back to 2009 when I was in charge of property crimes. And that was a time frame we had some of the lowest crime rates, property crime rates. And I had a simple philosophy. Every day that a repeat offender is in jail is one day less of houses they're breaking into, one day less of cars they're stealing. And when you look at a prolific auto theft offender who may steal 3 cars a week, you think you get 15 of those in custody over 6 weeks, you're looking at hundreds of less stolen cars because of those actions. And we'll take it one day at a time, and we will continue to incarcerate people that need to be for their certain period of time, but also making sure our officers get out to those emergency service calls quicker.
When's the last time you had 1,000 officers?
Oof. I'm gonna say probably when the state allowed double dipping and we're able to hire para-rehirees.
Why do you see that as something that can happen now? I know you've talked, and the mayor's talked about 1,100 was the number, and 1,100 is now kind of like this number that might not be reachable. Why is 1,000 when it hasn't been reached in so long? Why do you think you'll get there?
Because,
More academies.
yes, we've increased our academies, and you look at our trending. We'll be more than happy to share with you and sit down with you separately and explain what we've done recruiting-wise, see how our recruiting trends are up. I will bet money on this. IPRA, every law enforcement agencies in New Mexico is hiring, and I will bet you nobody's out hiring us right now.
So it sounds like we need PSAs and ACS workers. Where are we at with those? If you believe that these National Guardsmen will be serving in that capacity, what are those numbers? And what are you doing to incentivize or recruit for those positions?
I don't do anything, I don't think any more to incentivize PSAs. I'm overstaffed 30, 40 PSAs right now.
So how many total PSAs do you have?
We have somewhere around 80-ish. Somewhere around 80-ish. We'll get you the exact number.
Wait,
And
so
how-
why can't PSAs do this?
Because we already have our PSAs tasked out doing a lot of things.
The overstaffed
Yes.
PSAs.
Yep.
So where does ACS fit in this equation?
I mean, you gotta realize that ACS is also just following that model of civilianization Mayor talked about. ACS, the other day, they did a story about they've taken 100,000 calls for service. Realistically, that's probably about 80,000 calls APD didn't have to take, and they're taking a lot of the calls that didn't require a law enforcement officer. So this is about us making sure that we continue to get every resource and leverage every resource possible to help us continue to make progress
So
in the
will
city.
these National Guardsmen be with ACS as well? I mean, I guess I'm just wondering how ACS fits into the equation when you're talking about the fentanyl and the homelessness issues as well as some of the other crimes.
You know, there's still a lot of specifics that we're working on. I don't think there's an intention to have them paired up with ACS at this point in time. It wasn't in our original ask. But one thing we did ask for is over the course of each summer, there are a lot of individuals who are unhoused who has health needs, who are out. And one of the list proposals that we asked the governor is that we have a team of medics who are out providing humanitarian aid from the National Guard over the summer for some of these individuals who are exposed to the elements and who may need medical attention or just somebody checking up on them.
But that wouldn't free up APD officers. That would free up AFR.
You know, we still get dispatched to a lot of those calls. Those calls generally come in as down and outs, and even though ACS is stretched to its thinnest, and we still get dispatched to those calls.
Just to clarify Matt's question a little bit too, how long are you expecting? Is it a month, 2 months? From, I know you said you're gonna take it day by day, but are you expecting a
That-
time frame?
That's a decision that isn't made by the Albuquerque Police Department. The governor's office will determine how long they want to have the guard out here.
So what was the trigger for this?
The trigger was strong communication and an opportunity for us to look and realize that we need to continue to make improvements within the city, and that there was help being offered and that we have carved out a way to get assistance to our officers.
Is this, no.
Go ahead.
No, you-
Yeah, Chief, did the governor indicate how many National Guards people she's sending?
They said 60 to 70 officers. They're not getting here tomorrow. Let's make that clear. Like, they have like 30 some days of training that we want to ensure that we put them through between us and state police to make sure that they're trained up on certain aspects of what we're going to be asking them to do. So, but I've heard the number 60 to 70.
This, the way it sounds, does not sound very much like an emergency. Is this kind of like the emergency order is being used to get these people here with this funding? I mean, the way you're describing it, like crime is down, making more arrests. I mean, it sounds like you guys are doing good work out there. You have a ton of PSAs. I mean, it doesn't sound like in what I would call an emergency.
You know, I think on a weekly basis, I look at all of the media out there stories, and let's see, I hear crime crisis, I hear crime is out of control. So I would look back at the media and I would say that I think this is, that there is a perception there is an emergency in the community that is out there.
So why not ask the state police to come in? I know the governor has called those operations before, these sworn officers that could actually maybe serve in an officer capacity.
They are out there. They're working an operation, I think, with the DA's office, state police, and BCSO are working an operation on each central at this time. So they do have resources, but they also have an entire state, and it's not like they are the biggest agency. They do have limited resources also, and each time I know that we ask them to bring additional officers, they're taken from communities like Taos, they're taken from communities like Deming, they're taken from communities like Aztec. So it doesn't make sense for them to always be robbing Peter to pay Paul.
What's the final goal here?
Lower crime rates, make the city better, ensure that the public feels safe and that our officers are able to do what sworn officers are sworn to do, law enforcement activities, and not necessarily block roadways.
I have a question for the mayor.
And then, can I grab Nick and then you grab the mayor and I'll scoot aside?
Perfect, thanks, Chief. So you said 30 days plus or so to train up the guardsmen on things. Are they following under your guys' policies or or understanding of their policies? Because you sent the memorandum.
They are working through the training, and that's why they're being put into situations where they are going to have to follow their policies, and they're going to have to develop what their rules are during those times. But we have to remember that the guard has limited ability to exercise force or enforcement within a community, and it's just I think there's this big misperception already that, oh, they're coming here to clean up Albuquerque. And no, they're coming here to assist APD officers to go back into service, so APD officers can clean up Albuquerque.
Just to follow up on that specific point, 50 or 60 National Guardsmen, how are they gonna communicate with dispatch? You have to buy 50 or 60 radios to give them?
That's something that's still being discussed, and fortunately for us, we're all interoperable within the state. That's why we went to the radio systems that we have. So between the state and other entities, if they do need radios, they should be able to get them radios. And there's not going to be 50, 60 always deployed. We may have to work, old school, where we actually trade off radios and give them to the next person. So yeah, there's some logistical parts that we're still going to work through.
How many sorry, one more question for you. How many PSAs, like, do you have enough PSAs right now when we talk about these incidents or big responses, like, just for an example, the Walmart incident? Do you have enough PSAs to go to those scenes and to serve in those capacities?
Not always. We still get officers tied up on those things.
So how many would you need per shift?
How many what? Guards
PSAs,
or PSAs?
or additional civilians to secure perimeters, so on and so forth?
That number would vary because we may have one critical incident, one traffic accident. I think last week at one point in time we had 2 fatal accidents that were being investigated and a homicide and a violent crimes call out. So you have 3 major scenes there that we're not going to have enough PSAs for. So we could use as many PSAs as we want, but it's unfeasible to think that we're funded enough to have enough working out there each shift 7 days a week to be able to pick up every single perimeter post on a scene security.
And on the number of PSAs, we currently have 68, and there are 23 that are going to graduate on the 18th of this month.
70, 80, so 91 PSAs with once those 23 graduate.
Right, we started at 20 when you originally came.
When did the National Guard reach out to offer help?
Yeah, they said, is there ways we could work together?
Okay, just they
Yes.
reached out. Okay, when did that happen?
A couple months ago.
A couple months ago. Okay, and just to be clear, I think the mayor said it, but they're not going to be armed.
No,
They're not going to be armed. Are they going to be doing like homeless encampment and stuff, or is it just like medic, just? And when I say homeless, I mean like clearing. I mean actual enforcement of policies.
I don't foresee that right now at this
No,
point in time.
they're not. They're staffed to APD.
Yeah, I don't see that.
Your turn.
Yeah, fire away.
Can you go to the podium?
Yeah, sure.
No, you.
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of this, but is this a political ploy for you to gain momentum with voters who feel like you haven't done enough to fight crime during your time?
Well, I think the numbers are what they are, and people can criticize them, and we all know that crime has been very high, and it's been going up for a decade. We also know we have never seen numbers like that, and I want to keep them going regardless of who's in office or whatever cycle it is. And when we've got a governor who's offering to help, and a department and a National Guard who also wants to help, I mean, I'm going to try every tool I can to do that. And this fits in line with our civilianization efforts. And so that's what it's about.
And for you, why hasn't this happened before? I know that they've reached out, but clearly you know how it works. I'm sure you've talked about these issues before. Why now?
Well, as Chief mentioned, really this came from initial outreach by the National Guard to the department saying how we can help. And to be honest, whether it's legislators or the governor, they're often asking me as mayor how they can help. The difference is, this idea had never come up before. And it was really born out of understanding responses to like wildfires. So what we've seen in other situations, right, is the National Guard being deployed in a civilian way, right, unarmed with polo shirts and actually helping people. And that idea was sort of coming around at the same time last year and through the fall as the success we've seen from our community safety department. And it's like, you know what, we'll take as many civilians as we can get to free up officers, and then those two ideas came together.
The ACLU sent me an email over here saying that they're kind of against this. They're thinking, use of force, like victimizing underserved communities. What would you say in response to those assertions and assumptions?
I think it's important to just be truthful about what this is and what it's not, right? So they are not doing law enforcement. They do not have weapons. And they're not going to be using any military vehicles, and they're not going to be in military uniform. So this is going to be similar to what you see like after a forest fire when they're doing humanitarian response. The difference is they're supporting a department. And so I don't think any of the concerns that they just raised are actually a reality. In fact, I think we've done a good job of saying that's not at all what this is.
On the flip side, is there any concern that having them unarmed would put them in a dangerous situation in that they are not doing law enforcement, but they are doing like what police do, kind of, in various like side roles, basically?
I think we're always concerned about any civilian workers in a dangerous situation. And so that is true for our security force that we have, which is several hundred, again, officers without weapons. We also have our PSAs, which are in the same situation, the entire community safety department and the fire department. Yes, we're always concerned about that, but throughout city life and city departments, we do our best to mitigate that concern. But frankly, it's a concern for everyone, even code enforcement.
So is,
Sorry. So you keep saying that they were offering help.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
I think actually in general, people offer help all the time whenever we're have challenges. So it may be a surprise to some, but elected officials try and offer help. They just don't always know what to offer, and we don't always know what will work. And it took us several months to come up with a plan that we think is really helpful and also feasible from their end. And so it's actually quite a common conversation, especially because people are seeing two things. They're seeing some traction. You know, people are like, wow, maybe we actually are coming out of these tough times. And they're saying, what can I do to help make sure that continues? And I'm saying, look, we've got a steady, reliable leadership team. Let's put something together. And that's exactly what this is.
so what is your push then to make these positions permanent? Obviously, the chief says we have a bunch of PSAs, and that number is growing in a big way every year. But obviously, it's not enough. So is there a push to make either, you know, an incentive for more PSAs, or to use money to actually hire permanent positions? That way we're not just borrowing resources.
Sure, the chief can touch on some of that, but we already are trying to get as many PSAs as we can and as many officers as we can. So that push is there.
We need to understand and remember our budgeting process and the fact that I'm funded 1,000 officers. And right now, with the numbers Gilbert just gave you, I'm overstaffed 40 PSAs. That money still has to come from within my budget. I'm taking it from the salary savings of our sworn officers not being at 1,000. So you could look at it that I'm funded, and this is a rough estimate, 960. I just told you we're almost at 950. That overfunding of PSA, the overstaffing of PSAs is gonna continue to reduce as we get closer to 1,000 officers. So when we hit 1,000 officers, we will not have more than 45 PSAs because that's what we were budgeted for. So that's it's a budgeting issue for us of what what we have funded and how we have to be able to utilize our funding to hire these extra PSAs.
How much of a warning did you guys have before the governor made the order?
The
how-
order?
Yeah, how much time notice did you guys have before the governor pushed out the order for the guard to come in?
We've been in conversations for a period of time over this. They did give me a heads up that they were gonna do some media on this, and, but
Sent the
we,
letter when?
we sent the letter weeks ago. I'd almost say 2 weeks ago.
Our first letter was months ago.
Yeah, it's been, like, it's not just like all of a sudden it was one conversation. These have been conversations, and I guess the question is, like, are you asking when the media release went out, or when we
just
decided?
like when the communication between the governor's office and your department, when did that start?
Oh, it's
When-
been ongoing over the past few months.
Yeah, I do want to follow up on the, you know, like a good chief, he's well aware of his budget. I just want to emphasize, like, these right now are resources that the city does not have to pay for. So in general, you know, I've always got a predisposition for resources that don't cost us. And the challenge going forward is we do need to fund all this. And that's what you saw with some of this debate over the opioid funding. Anytime we can get funding into city efforts that are already working, we think that's our best investment because it helps people now. And that's why you saw the debate last night about other ideas about sort of doing longer term investments. And so all of those are real. The more funding we get for ACS, the more funding we get for running our shelter system, that also means more funding freed up for PSAs.
When you said 4 academies earlier, you meant there's like 4 ongoing academy classes right now?
Yeah, so when there were a number of changes, and I always like to highlight them when Chief came on and we decided we were gonna fight crime differently. We weren't just gonna wait for more officers. Part of it was the academy. We used to have essentially 1 happen at a time, and now at any given time we have 3 or 4. And so they're like, think of it like an assembly line where we have officers and PSAs rolling off every 3 months. And that's really helped the lumpiness of our staffing, right? We used to go way down, everyone retired at the end of the year, and then the academy would come in the next part of the year, and they would like fill it back up. And so that's completely changed our staffing model.
And so how many cadets are in those academies?
Right now, we have about 50 in this cycle that's going on right now, but just a few
I think
weeks
that's in
ago,
3
we
different
graduated-
academies.
Yeah, we graduated 17 just a few weeks ago, but in 3 weeks, we're starting what we're hoping is an additional 30. And actually, I'll surprise Mayor now, but he'll be happy about it. We're actually gonna have 5 police academies this year, as opposed to the
Even
2
better.
traditional that we had in the past. We're able to get enough. So basically, what our philosophy is as soon as we get to about 20 people, we wanna start a class. We get to 20 people, we start a class. Instead of having them sit around for 3
Yeah.
months, possibly get jobs at another agency and we lose them somewhere else, we get a class started so they start their process.
And remember that the PSAs is also a pipeline to permanent
Permanent
officers.
officers.
I think one of the classes is the most we've ever had with PSAs are transitioning to the academy. So even though we have a lot of PSAs, then that's going down.
It goes up
but
and
it's
down,
funneling.
fluctuates.
Someone could look at this and say APD can't handle its own business. What would you say to that?
You know, there's always.
Look at that.
Yeah, look at that.
But that was done without the National Guard.
Yeah,
I'm saying
yes.
the National Guard thing.
So it's gonna be better, I hope, after that.
Yeah.
There's always gonna be people who are naysayers. They just don't like me or mayor.
Yeah, we need to wrap up. How many?
Sorry, just one more.
last couple?
Yeah.
So you had mentioned training for these National Guardsmen. Who's going to be doing that training?
It's a combination of the Guard, State Police, and APD.
So what does that look like?
I don't have the exact details with me. It's somebody else is working on that.
Chief, so you mentioned they're gonna be in polo shirts. So I'm assuming, are they gonna have like APD patches on there, like
No,
some
my
employees do?
my
or-
recommendation is they have some kind of markings that say New Mexico National Guard. So that was my recommendation. They shouldn't have any kind of identification that they're City of Albuquerque or Albuquerque Police Department. So they should have markings that indicate who they are.
So what authority do they have then? I mean, because they're not officers. So if they go up to someone and tell, just for an example, sir, move. I mean, what authority do they have to make sure that individual moves?
We're gonna be asking them to do tasks our public police service aides do. So they should have the same level of authority as a non-sworn police service aide has. And they're limited. They have limited authority, we know that. That's why they can't always do what we'd like them to do. But that's also what keeps them from being endangered. And just building off the little question you asked me earlier is like, how about their safety? We send unarmed police service aides into the community every single day, and we're comparing it to them. So I think it's a good comparison that our police service aides are unarmed, and other resources can help us unarmed.
So if they're just wearing a patch that's like, hi, I'm with the National Guard, how are people gonna know to follow them? Is that our job just to make sure everyone knows? Or, because typically it's APD.
I think this is where we get so involved in details and questions that we overthink things.
Oh, no.
They're gonna be blocking roadways, so, yeah.
We're gonna give the chief a break here. Look, they're not supposed to be engaged with the public. That's the answer to your question, right? That's what our officers or our PSAs will be doing. I mean, we're talking about literally what drains police officer time. We have to lock the doors at the Sunport, and we use a sworn officer for that. We don't want to do that. We have to have X amount of people just watching the hospital. We don't want to do that. We have people directing traffic at major traffic scenes, and yeah, you got to know how to direct traffic. We get that, but those folks never need to be sworn. That's what they're doing. They're not really meant to be public facing. And when they are, it's utilizing the radio, just like our PSAs or our service aides, and they would just call it in.
Okay, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks.